I had a request from a pregnant mother to build a rocking chair. Every mother with a newborn needs a rocking chair. They had chose a stylish design on Etsy called the Onada Rocking Chair. So we bought the plans and a truck full of wood. This build was going to take 4 half sheets of plywood to make a whole lot of parts. This was really my first big project for my OneFinity CNC. It is the Elite Foreman model, which will do a 4-foot by 4-foot sheet of plywood. So let's get everything loaded and start the cuts. As it was my first project, I had a lot of learning to do. I had to learn how to get as many parts as possible onto a sheet of plywood. It was a real joy to watch this thing run, really for the first time. I used bridges or tabs to hold the parts inside the plywood. This keeps them from bouncing into the cutter and getting damaged. Most of them held, but I'm still learning. Now I've got a pile of 78 parts. What am I going to do with these? We have to use our router and a flush trim bit to cut off the tabs and smooth the edges. Now we have to smooth all the edges using the drum sander. This is going to be a lot of work. I chose to use spacers between the slats. Slight design modification. Now I'm using a 1/16 inch roundover bit. It saves a lot of sanding. Kinda silly, but this is for a newborn and a mother. You can barely see the effect of the 1/16 inch roundover bit, but you can feel it. Work, work, work. Again, there are a lot of parts to route. Now that I've got them smooth, I'm going to ruin all my good work. I'm using a water-based finish, so I need to wet the grain to raise the grain to sand it down again. Sanding never ends, but it's well worth it for the end product. Now I made a mistake. My dowel rods to hold everything together are 1 inch. But I bought a metric plan, so the holes were smaller and I didn't adjust them. So we go to the lathe to cut down our dowel rods to the right diameter. I used my Nova chuck and a cup center, and I got to work. Just takes time and patience. And again, more sanding. Now, back to the other parts. All of the plywood is 1/2 inch, so we need the sides to be stronger to hold up the whole rocker. So we will double the 2 1/2 inch sheets to make a 1 inch sheet. This will work much better. A little glue and a natural finger brush works wonders. Now I have to make sure the dowel holes line up when I do the glue up. And now the clamping begins. It's good to have a lot of clamps. Glue the second side and set them aside and wait for tomorrow. Now to start gluing all these parts together. I started with the bottom swoosh. I used hide glue because it's slower setting. It would give me more time to get every part in the assembly together. I glued the swoosh and then a spacer. A swoosh and then a spacer. Wanted to make sure I had good glue coverage. Rinse and repeat. Now I take the stack out of the vise, lay it flat to make sure everything's aligned so that I can clamp it up. I need to get good pressure on the glue joint without bending all the 1/2 inch thick plywood parts. A little caution and care, and it's not a problem. Then I put spacers to make sure everything's lined up and looking good. Now to glue up the seat. I used hand screws as a convenient way to hold the dowel rods upright. 2 of them stacked was the right height. Again, I used the slower setting hide glue. I needed to make sure the front of the seat was level, so I added spacers to the front. These dowels were a little tighter, which isn't a bad thing for a glue joint, but it caused me some more work. Now we get busy. Attention to detail is the key to a quality product. Again, I need to use the 1/2 inch spacers on both ends to get everything perfect. This time I used a glue brush to help me get everything spread out evenly. That's a big stack. And again, proper clamping pressures the glue joints but doesn't distort the parts. I wanted to peg all the parts to the dowels. I figured this would make it stronger. A rocker goes through a lot of forces during the rocking cycles. I started by drilling an 1/8-inch diameter hole with a standard length drill bit. Then I followed that with a longer drill bit. It was just easier for me to use the 2 drill bits. I used blue tape to make sure I drilled to the right depth, but not too far. Add the glue, and then pound in the dowel rod. I used the diagonal cutters just to make quick work of this. I will come back and clean up the dowels later. I cleaned up the dowels with a chisel to make them smooth. Then we get out the belt sander to get busy smoothing things again and leveling any imperfections. This is a lot of work. Once everything's sanded and ready for final assembly, we can put on the rocker sides. Planning how you're going to do your glue-ups helps, but it's still helpful to be an octopus. There are never enough hands. Clamps can be our best friend. I needed to make sure the swoosh was level with the sides in order to get a smooth rocking action. That's why I spent so much time making sure the front, middle, and back of the swoosh were aligned as good as possible. A few more clamps at each of the dowel rods on the top, and then a couple more pieces to make sure the bottom is aligned. That's the best I can do. Now this feels pretty good, but I need to sand the rockers a little smoother to make sure there's no bumps on the road. And now to paint. The request was to use a white milk paint. It's nice and safe, being water-based. Now back to sanding between coats. Sanding between all these slats is quite the chore, and everyone knows how much I love sanding. Add another couple coats and sand in between, and we'll be finished. Well, now it's done, and it looks pretty good. I'm very proud of this. It's my first really big project on the CNC. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and ring the bell. I appreciate you watching the Johnsonville Woodworker.